Welcome, everyone. Let's jump right into today's key global stories. We're seeing some major developments in trade, a significant political move in Sudan, and even some, well, unusual tech pranks.
Absolutely. Starting with trade, the U.S.-China situation. It continues to cause real disruption. We're hearing about small business owners like Lionel Zhu,
Right, the one with the mosquito repellent kits.
that's him, Sorbo Technology,
Hmm.
facing 145% U.S. tariffs. It's seriously affecting his sales to places like Walmart, and he's got warehouses full of stock, a factory of 400 workers worried.
And it's not just him, is it? Amy's ice cream maker company, too.
Yes, Guangdong Sailing Trade Company. They've actually stopped production entirely because of the tariffs. Their stuff is just sitting in a warehouse. Walmart was a big buyer for them, too.
So you saw this across the board at the Canton Fair. Homewares, juicers, all sorts.
Pretty much. U.S. firms just can't absorb those kinds of costs. It's widespread.
Even though Trump paused most tariffs recently, the China ones stayed.
That's right. And China hit back with its own levies on U.S. imports. It's a real back and forth.
But some people are defiant, like that buyer, Hy-Vee.
Yeah, there's a sense that China can rely on its huge domestic market. 1.4 billion people.
But stimulating that spending isn't easy, is it? With housing prices down and people saving more?
Exactly. It's a challenge. And China's economy is still very export-driven. Exports were, what, half of last year's growth?
Hmm.
Goldman Sachs thinks 10 to 20 million people in China work on stuff just for the U.S. market.
You can see the impact on the ground, too, right?
Oh.
In Guangdong, the manufacturing hub for Xinpimu, workers getting less pay.
Definitely. Pay cuts reported, like from 300, 400 yuan down to maybe 100 a day. Finding work is getting harder.
So China risks losing a massive market, over $400 billion, and the U.S. might be looking at a recession.
That's the potential fallout, yes. Beijing says they'll fight until the end, but interestingly, no new tariff hikes are planned for now. And there's very little communication between Washington and Beijing.
Are companies finding ways around it? New markets?
Some are trying. Europe, Saudi Arabia, Amy's trying to sell her ice cream makers in Russia now. But others, like Mei Kunyan's shoe firm, are just focusing on selling within China. He actually said Americans are too tricky.
Okay, sticking with the U.S.-China theme, but moving to tech. NVIDIA.
Big news there. They're expecting a pretty hefty $5.5 billion hit because the U.S. tightened export rules on their H20 AI chip to China.
They need licenses now, indefinitely.
Yes, for China and Hong Kong. The U.S. government is worried about these chips ending up in supercomputers.
And the market reacted. NVIDIA shares dropped.
They did, plunged almost 6%. Though one analyst, Mark Einstein, thinks NVIDIA can probably handle it, and maybe it's even a negotiating tactic from the U.S. side.
Chips are definitely a key battleground here.
Absolutely. Rui Ma from TechBuzz China expects a full decoupling. Separate supply chains for AI semiconductors between the U.S. and China.
Let's shift continents now. Ghana and its gold market. What's happening there?
Ghana's making a big change. They're banning all foreigners from trading in the local gold market starting April 30th, 2025.
Why the ban?
To boost government revenue and streamline the whole mining sector, a new law gives the Ghana Gold Board, Goldbod, exclusive authority over gold from artisanal and small-scale mining, ASM.
So foreigners can still buy gold, just differently.
Right. They can apply to buy directly from Goldbod, but they can't operate within that local value chain anymore. Local dealer licenses are being revoked, though there's a grace period.
And transactions?
All in Ghanaian cedis, based on the Bank of Ghana's rates. Dealing without a Goldbod license becomes a punishable offense.
Is the government backing this financially?
Yes. They've put aside about $279 million for Goldbod to buy and export at least 3 tons a week, trying to boost foreign exchange.
How are local traders reacting?
The Chamber of Bullion Traders supports the idea, but they are a bit worried if the government has enough cash to buy all the gold. They kind of preferred partnerships with foreign investors.
Could this help with illegal mining? Galamsey.
That's definitely a hope. Galamsey causes terrible environmental pollution. It's seen as a move by President Mohammed's administration to tighten regulations and tackle that problem. It sends a strong message.
And Ghana's gold exports have been doing well.
Very well. Up 53.2% last year. That's $11.64 billion. And gold prices are up recently, too, partly due to those U.S.-China trade tensions we were just discussing.
Okay, one more economic story, this one from Nigeria. Problems with an investment app, CBEX.
Yeah, this sounds quite distressing. Nigerians using this digital platform, CBEX, are reporting they're locked out of their accounts. People are really scared they've lost their savings.
Locked out. What's being said?
Social media is full of reports, people crying, unable to withdraw money. Apparently, some furious customers even ransacked a CBEX office in Ibadan. CBEX itself hasn't said anything publicly yet.
What was CBEX offering?
This is the worrying part. They promised to double investors' money monthly. Huge red flag, especially with Nigeria facing economic difficulties. People are desperate.
How much are people losing?
One investor mentioned fearing losing 450,000 naira, about $280. But others are reporting much bigger losses, like $16,000. The problem started over the weekend and really blew up on Monday.
Any explanation from CBDX at all?
On their Telegram channel, they apparently cited a hack and promised it would be resolved. But, it sounds shaky.
Has the regulator stepped in? The SEC?
Nigeria's SEC hasn't commented specifically on CBEX yet, but they have warned people before about unregulated platforms and Ponzi schemes. It sadly reminds people of the MMM scheme collapse back in 2016.
Right. Let's move to politics and international relations. Sudan. A rival government declared.
Yes, the paramilitary group, the RSF, has declared its own government. This is happening 2 years into a devastating war, which is now the world's largest humanitarian crisis.
What's the RSF leader Hemedti saying?
He's framing it as building the only realistic future for Sudan, a state based on law, not ruled by individuals seeking unity. He's promising essential services nationwide.
And the timing, coinciding with that London conference.
That's exactly. While the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy was calling for a pathway to peace, this announcement dropped. Meanwhile, the fighting just goes on. The army bombed RSF positions near El Fasher, forcing civilians to flee the Zamzam refugee camp again.
The violence is relentless. The UN reported hundreds killed recently by the RSF.
Over 400. And both sides are accused of war crimes. It's fundamentally a power struggle between Hemedti and the army chief, General al-Burhan, that started back in April 2023. Over 150,000 killed, more than 12 million displaced. It's catastrophic.
And that situation in El Fasher? People walking miles to escape.
Tens of thousands forced from Zamzam camp, walking about 70 kilometers to Tawila. Reports of people arriving dehydrated, children dying. And around El Fasher itself, over 700,000 people in camps are facing famine-like conditions because aid just can't get through.
The UK pledged more aid, right?
Another 120 million, urging the world not to look away. The conference called for an immediate ceasefire, and the African Union is strongly against any idea of partitioning Sudan.
Okay, shifting to the US. Protests at a Republican town hall. Marjorie Taylor Greene's event.
Yes, in Cobb County, Georgia. Things got quite heated. Police removed about half a dozen people, and 3 were arrested.
Tasers were involved.
Reports say one man was tasered inside the venue and another attendee outside as well. The arrestees are facing charges like battery on an officer and obstruction. Police said their officers were threatened and harmed. Greene thanked the police for handling it.
Also in the U.S., the situation between former President Trump and Harvard seems to be escalating.
It really is. Trump's now calling for Harvard to lose its tax-exempt status, on top of freezing over $2 billion in federal funds. He's demanding big changes to fight anti-Semitism.
What kind of changes?
Things like how they hire, admissions policies, teaching. He wants them to report hostile students, ensure viewpoint-diverse departments, allow a government-approved audit, check faculty for plagiarism, discipline protesters, a whole list.
And Harvard's response?
They've rejected the demands flat out. They accuse the White House of trying to control the university and said they won't surrender their independence or First Amendment rights. The White House press secretary wants an apology from Harvard.
The education department weighed in too.
Yeah, criticizing Harvard's entitlement mindset and calling the campus disruptions and harassment of Jewish students unacceptable.
This seems like a major clash over academic freedom.
Absolutely. A Harvard history professor called Trump's actions groundless and vengeful, saying the university can afford to resist because freedom is priceless. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik wants funding cut off completely.
And faculties are pushing back legally.
Yes, some professors filed a lawsuit arguing it's an unlawful attack on free speech. Even former President Obama criticized Trump's move as unlawful and ham-handed and applauded Harvard. MIT has also rejected similar demands.
Are other universities feeling this pressure?
Yes. Reports suggest others, including Stanford, are facing funding freezes and budget cuts. It taps into a broader decline in public confidence in higher education, especially among Republicans who feel universities push a political agenda.
Related to campus issues, there's the arrest of a Palestinian student activist.
Mohsen Madawi, yes. He's a Columbia student, a green card holder applying for citizenship. He was arrested by ICE during his citizenship interview in Vermont.
Why? His lawyer thinks it's retaliation.
The lawyer claims it's direct retaliation for his pro-Palestinian activism. Other student protesters have apparently also been detained recently.
What's Madawi's background?
He was born in a West Bank refugee camp, moved to the U.S. in 2014. Described as a committed Buddhist, believes in nonviolence. He co-founded Colombia's Palestinian Student Society and has been critical of Israel's operation in Gaza. A judge has granted a temporary restraining order preventing his removal for now.
This is happening amidst a wider immigration crackdown.
Seems so. Secretary of State Marco Rubio mentioned that at least 300 foreign student visas have been revoked recently to tackle campus anti-Semitism. Critics argue students are being falsely accused and free speech is being violated. Senator Bernie Sanders called Madawi's detention illegal and demanded his release.
Moving across the Atlantic to Hungary, new constitutional changes there.
Yes, the parliament-backed amendments that limit the rights of LGBTQ plus people and also dual nationals.
What's the government's reasoning?
They say it's about protecting children's physical and moral development. It will enable them to ban public LGBTQ plus gatherings. Rights campaigners are calling it a key moment in Hungary's shift towards what they call illiberal governance. Hundreds protested.
Prime Minister Orban has been quite vocal about this.
He vowed an Easter cleanup of critics. The vote passed easily. The amendments also allow citizenship to be temporarily suspended for dual nationals. Seen as a security threat, speculation is that could target someone like George Soros.
This follows other laws like the one banning pride marches.
Correct. Orban said, "We won't let woke ideology endanger our kids." An opposition MP argued it's not just about pride, but potentially any assembly organized by the opposition.
The government spokesperson framed it as a safeguard.
Yes, Zoltan Kovacs called it a constitutional safeguard against ideological influences that threaten the well-being of children. It's widely seen as an effort to reshape Hungary along Christian conservative lines. Interestingly, polls show a new center-right party, Tisza, gaining ground, and some think the government wants to force its leader to take a stance on pride before next year's election.
Let's head to Asia now. China's President Xi Jinping was in Vietnam.
Yes, part of a charm offensive trip that also includes Malaysia and Cambodia. Amidst the U.S.-China trade war, he urged Vietnam to oppose unilateral bullying to uphold free trade.
A clear message, even without naming names.
Very clear. Vietnam itself got hit with U.S. tariffs up to 46% before that temporary pause. Former President Trump wasn't impressed, calling Xi's meeting a ploy to screw the United States.
So Xi's message to Vietnam's leaders was about resisting pressure.
He told the Communist Party Secretary General To Lam to jointly oppose unilateral bullying, strengthen resolve, and protect free trade and supply chains. A former U.S. trade negotiator called it a very shrewd tactical move by Xi, positioning China as the defender of trade.
Trump still sees it purely as damaging the U.S.
Yes, he said he doesn't blame them, but thinks they're focused on hurting the U.S. There was some confusion about tariff exemptions for smartphones and computers, but Trump denied those were happening.
How's Vietnam likely playing this?
Carefully, analysts believe. They won't want to look like they're siding with China against the U.S. Xi is expected to keep painting the U.S. as unreliable and protectionist on his further stops in Malaysia and Cambodia.
And finally, in our political roundup, former President Trump's comments on Zelensky and the Ukraine war.
Yes, he again blamed President Zelensky for starting the war with Russia. This came right after a major Russian attack in Sumy that killed 35 and injured over 100.
He said Zelensky shares blame with Putin.
Yes, for millions of people dead, although the actual casualty figures are estimated in the hundreds of thousands. He questioned Zelensky's competence, saying he was always looking to purchase missiles.
This isn't the first time he said this.
No, he's blamed Zelensky and Biden repeatedly, despite Russia initiating the conflict years ago and the full-scale invasion. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte visited Ukraine recently and condemned Russia's aggression.
Trump described the Sumy attack as terrible, but then added something about Russia making a mistake.
Yes, but didn't elaborate. Moscow claimed they hit a meeting of Ukrainian soldiers, killing 60, but provided no evidence. Ukrainian media reported a medal ceremony for veterans was happening in Sumy that day. Zelensky has since sacked Sumy's regional chief.
Have there been any contacts between Trump's circle and Russia?
Trump mentioned having a great call with Putin and receiving a portrait as a gift. And a U.S. envoy, Steve Witkoff, recently met Putin. Witkoff called the meeting compelling, discussed permanent peace, the future of annexed territories, and no NATO Article 5. He hinted something significant might be emerging.
How did the Kremlin respond?
Spokesman Dmitry Peskov described the contacts as positive, but said there were no clear outlines yet. Zelensky had previously urged Trump to visit Ukraine before making any deals with Putin.
Okay, let's switch gears to society and culture. Some odd happenings in Silicon Valley. Hacked pedestrian crossings.
Yeah, bit bizarre. Crossings in Palo Alto, Redwood City, Menlo Park were apparently hacked. Instead of the usual walk-wait signals, they started playing fake messages.
Fake messages. Like what?
Impersonations of Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. The fake Musk supposedly offered someone a Cybertruck if they'd be his friend. The fake Zuckerberg apparently said, "Real ones call me the Zuck," and talked about inserting AI into consciousness.
Seriously, who did this?
Nobody knows yet, or how they did it. Officials are investigating. They think it might have happened on Friday. The audio feature was disabled and the buttons deactivated as a precaution. About 10 crossings in Menlo Park, Palo Alto, maybe more downtown, plus reports from Redwood City. Neither Musk nor Zuckerberg has commented.
Strange. Now, over to France, escalating attacks on prisons.
Yes, the French justice minister is calling them terrorism. There have been incidents across the country, vehicles set on fire outside prisons. One jail even hit by gunfire. Places like Toulon, Marseille, Nîmes, Nanterre.
When did this start? And why?
It began on Sunday. The justice minister thinks it's a response to the government cracking down hard on drug trafficking. Anti-terrorism prosecutors are now involved.
Actual gunfire at a prison gate.
In Toulon, yes. Kalashnikov fire reported. The interior minister wants security beefed up. Prison guard unions are, understandably, very concerned and angry. They've shared images of burnt vehicles and bullet holes.
Are the guards being targeted directly?
The unions say staff vehicles are being hit, and they don't have enough officers to secure the perimeters. There was even a report of an officer threatened at home in Nancy and attempted arson at officers' accommodation in Marseille. Even the National School for Prison Administration was attacked.
Has anyone claimed a responsibility?
No specific group. But DDPF, linked to French prisoners' rights, was inscribed on some damaged vehicles, and anarchist slogans were found at some sites. It looks coordinated and likely linked to that anti-drug strategy. The government is pushing forward with plans for high-security prisons for drug lords and a new law for a special prosecutor for drug crimes.
Moving east to Russia, a hairdresser jailed.
Yes, Anna Alexandrova from St. Petersburg, sentenced to 5 years and 2 months for supposedly spreading fake news about the Russian army.
What did she allegedly do?
Posted some anti-war messages on VKontakte, the Russian social media site, but she denies it and claims the whole thing started as a land dispute with a neighbor who complained after Alexandrova sent her daughter pictures related to the war.
This fake news law has been used a lot since the invasion, right?
Yes, discrediting the army or spreading fake news about it became a crime. It's part of a major Kremlin crackdown on any dissent. There are reports of denunciations leading to prison, like in the Soviet era.
Was this case just about the posts?
Her lawyer says it began as a simple squabble over deforestation, and the fake news charge only came later after she fell out with the neighbor. She's been sent to a penal colony and banned from posting online for 3 years.
Is anyone challenging this law?
Yes, lawyers for Alexei Gornov, a Moscow counselor previously jailed for criticizing the invasion, have filed a complaint with the Constitutional Court. They argue the law punishes anti-war views and truthful information that contradicts the official narrative.
Okay, down to Spain now. An arrest involving exotic cats.
That's right. The couple arrested in Mallorca. They're suspected of selling exotic cats online, things like white tigers, pumas, even clouded leopards.
Selling them online? Were animals recovered?
Yes, 19 felines were rescued, including a caracal, servals, and various hybrids. The Civil Guard thinks this is just the tip of the iceberg of a global criminal operation involving breeders, transporters, maybe even vets.
Where were the animals coming from?
Reportedly smuggled from Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine into the EU via Poland using false documents. The couple's social media was apparently very active, with international buyers. They even advertised hyenas and desert lynxes. A clouded leopard was priced at 60,000 anal.
Wow. What happens to the rescued animals?
They're temporarily at the Sun Cervera Safari Zoo, but might be moved to a proper rescue center. It highlights the demand for these animals as status symbols, often fueled by social media, even though they're incredibly difficult and dangerous to care for. Many end up abandoned.
Switching topics completely, space. Katy Perry went up.
She did. Part of an all-female Blue Origin spaceflight. They returned safely to Earth.
Who else was on board?
Lauren Sanchez, Gail King, Aisha Bowe, Amanda Nguyen, and Carrie-Ann Flynn. It was about an 11-minute suborbital flight, going over 100 kilometers up, experiencing weightlessness.
What were their reactions?
Perry said she felt super connected to life. Gail King mentioned Perry singing "What a Wonderful World." Sanchez apparently saw the moon as that Earth looked quiet, but really alive. Jeff Bezos was there to open the capsule when it landed.
Was this the first all-female spaceflight?
Not the very first Valentina Tereshkova flew solo in 1963, but it's the first all-female crewed flight in over 60 years, which is significant. Though, women have obviously made huge contributions to space exploration throughout that time.
How's space tourism viewed generally?
It's still in its infancy, so a successful launch like this is notable for Blue Origin. But critics often dismiss it as just tourism for the ultra-rich, not real science. An ESA expert noted, celebrities get way more attention than scientists doing research up there.
Mixed reactions online, I bet.
Definitely. Enthusiasm from some, but also comments like, Real Housewives go to Mars, or concerns about the oligarchy in space. Some experts hope it might encourage more diverse groups to aspire to space travel.
King and Sanchez defended the flight.
Yes, against criticism about cost and priorities. They cited positive responses, especially from young women. Blue Origin requires a $150,000 deposit, though full ticket prices aren't public.
What about the environmental impact?
That's a major criticism. Blue Origin claims its only byproduct is water vapor, but experts point out water vapor is still a greenhouse gas high up in the atmosphere, and the cost makes it incredibly exclusive.
A somber story now from New Mexico, related to Gene Hackman.
Yes, sadly. Following the recent deaths of actor Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa, health officials investigated their home in Santa Fe. They found evidence of rodent nests and dead rodents in several outbuildings near the main house.
This was where his wife died of hantavirus.
That's what medical investigators believe, yes. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, or HPS. It's transmitted by infected rodents, usually through inhaling dust from dried droppings. The investigation found rodent feces, live and dead rodents, and nests in garages and sheds within about 50 yards of the main house.
Was the main house affected?
No, reports say the main house was clean with no signs of rodent activity. Ms. Arakawa died around February 12th. Mr. Hackman, who was 95 and had advanced Alzheimer's, died around the 18th. Their bodies were found later on the 26th.
What was Mr. Hackman's cause of death?
Severe heart disease, with Alzheimer's as a contributing factor. It's possible, tragically, that he didn't realize his wife had passed away.
Another tragic event, the nightclub collapse in the Dominican Republic. Charges being filed now.
Yes. The parents and wife of a police lieutenant, Virgilio Rafael Cruz Aponte, who died in the collapse, are the first family to press charges against the owners of the Jet Set Club.
What charges?
Manslaughter charges against the owner and managers. Other families are expected to file lawsuits, too. The owner, Antonio Espaillat, is reportedly cooperating with the investigation, which could take months.
Are they blaming local government, too?
Yes, accusing them of neglecting safety guidelines. The death toll sadly rose to 231 after 5 more people succumbed to their injuries. 189 were pulled out alive.
It happened during a concert.
Yes, merengue singer Ruby Perez was performing. He tragically died in the collapse, though his daughter, a backing singer, survived. Several foreign nationals were among the dead, including U.S. citizens. New York Mayor Eric Adams even visited Santo Domingo to mourn with the Dominican community there.
And an update on the hostage situation in Gaza. Hamas losing contact.
Hamas says it has lost contact with the specific group that was holding Eden Alexander, the U.S.-Israeli hostage. They claim this happened following an Israeli strike, but haven't provided evidence or a timeline.
Alexander had appeared in recent videos?
Yes, pleading for his release. Israel had asked for him to be released in a ceasefire proposal that Hamas ultimately rejected. Hamas spokesman Abu Obaida said they are still trying to reach the group holding him.
How many hostages are left?
Around 59 are believed to still be in Gaza, though sadly only 24 are thought to be alive. 5 are believed to be U.S. citizens, and Alexander was thought to be the only living American hostage.
Hamas released another warning video.
Yes, warning families that hostages might return in coffins if Israel's offensive continues. It's incredibly distressing for the families.
What's the latest on ceasefire talks?
Hamas says it's ready to return all hostages only if hostilities end completely and Israel fully withdraws. On Tuesday, they rejected Israel's latest proposal because it reportedly included Hamas disarmament but lacked a commitment from Israel to end the war or withdraw. Israel resumed its offensive back on March 18th after earlier talks failed. Since then, at least 1,630 more people have reportedly been killed in Gaza.
Let's move to science and environment. A sandstorm in Iraq.
A pretty bad one, yeah. Swept across central and southern Iraq, over 1,000 people ended up needing treatment for respiratory problems.
Where was it worst hit?
Muthanna province reported at least 700 cases of suffocation. Footage showed this thick orange haze everywhere. There were power cuts, flights suspended in Najaf and Basra. Hospitals in several provinces were flooded with patients having breathing difficulties.
Are these becoming more common?
Experts think so, yes, likely due to climate change. Dust storms are naturally common in Iraq, but frequency seems to be increasing. The UN lists Iraq as one of the 5 countries most vulnerable to climate change impacts like sandstorms, heat, and water scarcity. There was a deadly one back in 2022. The Environment Ministry expects more dust days ahead.
And finally today, a really unusual and disturbing story from Bangladesh. Secret jails.
Yes, investigators uncovered hidden jail cells near Dhaka's international airport. They were guided partly by the memories of former detainees, like Mir Ahmad bin Qasim.
How did he remember the location?
He had been held for 8 years, a critic of the ousted leader Sheikh Hasina. He remembered hearing planes landing constantly. The cells were found behind a bricked-up doorway in a heavily guarded windowless building on a military base.
So you were in these places?
Investigators say it was an elite counterterrorism unit, the Rapid Action Battalion, or RAB, acting on orders from former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Her party denies knowing about it, blaming the military, which also denies involvement.
These detainees were released after the government fell.
Many were, yes, after mass protests last August. But tragically, many others were allegedly unlawfully killed during their detention. The released victims are still terrified. Qasim, for instance, wears a hat and mask in public.
How many of these cells were there?
They found over 500, maybe up to 700 across the country. It suggests a widespread and systematic network. The chief prosecutor for the International Crimes Tribunal said officers told them these enforced disappearances had the PM's approval.
What were conditions like?
Horrific, based on accounts. Qasim described a tiny 10 by 14-foot cell with faint blue tiles, unbearable heat in summer, having to press his face to the doorway for air. Other victims tell similar stories. Blindfolded abduction, dark concrete cells, torture. Many are still deeply scared.
Have the perpetrators faced justice?
Over 120 arrest warrants have been issued, but no one has actually been brought to justice yet. The victims understandably fear for their lives.
That brings us to the end of our roundup. From complex trade wars impacting workers globally to harrowing accounts of human rights abuses and even some bizarre tech interference.
It really underscores how interconnected everything is, doesn't it?
Right.
Economic policy in one part of the world can affect livelihoods thousands of miles away, and political struggles can have devastating human consequences.
Definitely. Lots to think about there. Perhaps one question to leave with is, in this complex global landscape, how do nations balance economic competition with the need for cooperation and upholding basic human rights? Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us.